Hello, welcome. Come on in. Now, my name's Emily, and this is The Good Place. You're here, you made it. You did a good job in life. And now, we're here to talk about The Good Place. Which is an excellent show, and it's one of my favorite shows of all time. But it's also a really hard show. Not hard to talk about, but it came into my life at the perfect time, from the perfect person, to get me through what I was needing to go through at that time, to figure out what I needed to figure out who I am as a person, you know? Uh, and, you know, it's important to ask ourselves who we are as a person. And I think the show definitely tackles some of that. It tackles moral, right and wrong, afterlives, emotion, growing as a person, you know? Finding out who you really are in the face of peril, in the face of absolute damnation, in the face of the worst things that could possibly happen to you. Who are you in those moments? And, um, I was in one of those moments when I discovered this show. Um, as many of you can relate, 2020 was definitely one of the worst years of my entire life. Not because of everything that was happening, but because it was the peak of me not being able to be who I was. Because I was not willing to show the world and let the world accept who I was, or try to accept who I was. I hid who I was, you know, and I didn't know what the problem was at the time. Part of it was because I had just lost my job at the end of the previous year. Um, I quit, but that's a whole different thing. That's not relevant. Point being, I was without a job for several months there, looking for one that would fit. Felt like a good thing to do. It was, you know, you think that would be a dream to be able to play video games all day and relax and whatnot, and it was nice for a while, but oh, spoilers for The Good Place, by the way. At the end of the show, they actually finally get to the good place, and they realize that everyone's miserable because they've had this life there in the good place of pure eternal bliss infinitely. And it eventually becomes bad, which is crazy to think, right? You eventually become bored of it, and you just have no escape from it. Um, there's no end to it. Not an escape, really, but an end. There was no end. The afterlife is supposed to be the end, but it's supposed to go on for forever. But at some point, that became boring to those people. And they lived a truly, eternally good life by the metrics of the system, and yet they weren't happy. They were happy, but they were too happy. Happiness had lost meaning for them, at the end. That's kind of how it felt too with me and my situation. Is I was without a job. I didn't have to worry about the stresses of that. I was able to do what I wanted to do, just hang out, play video games, and do all that stuff. But at some point, the monetary weight of the world, the realistic weight of the world, the weighing down constantly of not being happy enough, doing the things that I love to do, or I thought I loved to do. I do love to do those things, but when there's no moderation to it, those things aren't special anymore. Um, and the show has a good quote about, one of the themes is about how if there's no ending to it, then it doesn't feel significant or special. I don't really remember. I mean, I know the show. I've just watched it. Um, I can't pinpoint exactly where and why that moment was happening other than in the ending, but they call back to it in the ending. Point being that I didn't know how my life was going to go at that point. And so I was worried, scared, but also just unsure and confused about my position in things and if things would ever really get better, you know. I was definitely at a low point in my life. And this was all before the pandemic and all of that shit. This was like pre that. I finally found my current job in April of 2020, which is funny in hindsight because of all of that, but I don't want to talk about that. That didn't help, but it wasn't all about that. But getting back to the relevant thing at hand here, the thing we're actually reviewing. By the way, this book isn't because of that. It's because of a thing I'll talk about here in a second. When I first started that job, and I'm sorry, I doubt you're watching this, but, you know, you don't watch my videos. What am I talking about? But if you do, I'm sorry if this is embarrassing or I'm oversharing or something. This is a very personal thing to myself, so I feel like it's worth talking about because it's very relevant to the situation. It's actually how I found out about the show, so that all kind of made sense. I was at my, like, pretty much, I mean, I thought my lowest. Maybe it was my lowest. Doesn't matter. It was at a very low point there. And as soon as I started that job, within like a week or so, I met one of my best friends. And I haven't met people that are like best friends in a long time, since like high school. The last one we actively hang out with, who we inducted in, was college, which was like 10 years ago, you know? Earlier than that, actually. It's probably like 11 years ago when we actually met him and started hanging out with him and stuff. Anyway, point being, it's been a really long time and I don't make friends very well, and I was very socially anxious a couple of years ago. But I met this girl, and she, I mean, for lack of a better words, she kind of changed my life, you know? And not like in a romantic way or something. I mean, there was definitely moments I thought about all of that. Obviously, I had some time there where that was what I thought our relationship was going to be, was that, but I've never been very good at that either. So, but I had a really good feeling about this person. She was always there for me and always just willing to talk with me and help me through things, and we shared a lot of common interests and stuff, and you know, I just I really love her, you know, and not in like a relationship-y way, like a totally platonic, like sisterly way. We're really good friends now, and she just really means a lot to me because she helped me through that, and because she continues to be a really big, important part of my life. And she helps me and she inspires me and she's here for me with my transition and all of that, which is really hard for me because I don't have any other really good female friends, you know? But she's always here for me, always helping me along, and I can never thank her enough for that, you know? I really love her. She's such a good person. But anyway, um, we like to recommend each other a lot of things. And one of the things she ended up recommending to me was this show, The Good Place. And it came at a perfect moment in my life because I've really connected with the show. And aside from that, it just made me feel good, you know, and happy and emotional all at once. One of the very first things she recommended to me, and is why it's here, is this book right here, Kafka on the Shore, which she hadn't finished at the time, and I ended up spoiling for her when I actually finished it, because she kept asking, have you finished it? Have you finished it? Have you finished it? Did you read it? Blah, 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 all this stuff. And then I finally did it, and I spoiled it for her, apparently. And I still have this, which is the very first thing that, well, she wrote it down so I could remember the name of the book. And I kept that with me because that's really meant a lot to me, you know? Especially at the time it did, but, sorry. And we just hung out yesterday, and I got my ears pierced, and I thought that was amazing, but I just, you know, I love us hanging out. She's the only, like, real female friend that I have, and she just means a lot to me, so, anyway, sorry about all of that. We're already 12 minutes into this thing, and I've already broke down crying. It was inevitable. It was gonna happen eventually anyway. I wanted to bring out, like, some philosophy books or something, but I'm, like, dearly under philosophy booked. I thought I had that book from college. I took this course in Intro to Philosophy, which I initially failed, because I wasn't trying that hard, and then I passed it. It was actually the very last class that I had to pass in order to pass college. So, and I did it. I made it through, so that was really special. And apparently I didn't miss a class because I got all the extra credit points for attendance, which is great. This is really special. Sorry, anyway, let's talk about The Good Place, because I really do want to talk about that, too. But we had to get to the teary way of me getting to this show, and she would tell me about it, and I did the same shit with the Owl House, and she finally did watch that, and she loved it. And this was way before that, though. She kept telling me about the show, and she'd talk about it all the time, and then I'm like, alright, I'll sit down and watch it. I probably need something to watch. I really don't remember how exactly, like, I barely remember that time. I do have, like, journals and stuff from that time. I'm sure I wrote about it, but, I should have really read some of that before this to remember, but it doesn't really matter. So, this time around, I sat down and binged it in a week. I literally started watching it, I think, Monday, and today is Saturday. Sunday? Yeah, and I watched the whole show. There's only 52... 52? Yeah, 52 episodes, or 52 chapters anyway, is what it says on the last thing there. And then it's over, you know? And they're all, like, 22 minutes outside of, like, the 40-minute opening and conclusions to the seasons. 44-minute, you know, like, double episode length kind of thing. But if that tells you anything, the show is incredibly bingeable. It is so fun to just keep watching every new episode, like next episode, because they always do that thing where they don't always leave you on a cliffhanger, but they also do that a lot. They just really um they continue to do that. They always keep you intrigued, but you always just want to see how the characters are going to grow and get through the next thing, and you're so attached to these characters, and there's so many good, funny moments, but also so many heartwarming moments and character connections and growths. Um, yeah, so what is this show, right? What is The Good Place? I mean, you should have seen it before you watch this. Please always watch the thing before you watch this. Um, but The Good Place is a show about these four characters who get into what they suppose is the good place. Spoilers, like I said. And at the end of the first season, Eleanor, the main character, played by Kristen Bell, who is a great actress. They're all great actor and actresses in this show. Very good, very emotional show. Anyway, she figures it out. She figures out that she's not actually in the good place. She's in the bad place. So you spend this whole season, all these problems, all these chaoses, being caused by her not belonging in the good place. You know, you think it's the good place the whole time. She doesn't belong because she wasn't a great person. She was a terrible person on Earth. She was an Arizona dirtbag or scumbag or whatever, like she always likes to say. And yeah, you know, that's how it was, you know? Like, sometimes you're not a great person on Earth. And by the end of the show, they finally fixed the system, because the system shows that, like nobody, even the best people, don't get into the good place, the real good place. Anyway, so they go the whole season kind of knowing this. The first episode, she kind of like figures that out. She gets introduced to her soulmate, which, and you know, like, there's a lot of things you figure out later, like that's not actually a real thing. Even Michael says that, like, way later on. He's the architect of the thing. That's like the exchange they have. Like, you know, she opens her eyes. That's like the first scene, and then Michael walks out of the office. Hello, Eleanor. Please come in. And then he explains, "You're dead. This is the good place." And she's like, "Cool," you know. Or well, he's like, "You're dead," and she's like, "Cool." And then he's like, she's like, you know, did I, and he's like, yeah, it's not really like the heaven and hell system, but you are in the good place. And he explains all this to her, shows her around, shows her soulmate in her house, which is like this weird kind of house that, like, it doesn't have stairs, and there's clowns everywhere, and it's like, it's just super odd, and like, totally the opposite of what she wants, obviously, because he's trying to torture her, but she doesn't know that at first. But she gets introduced to this guy, Chidi, who's one of the other four main characters, who's this, like, ethics kind of guy, professor in ethics and whatnot, and you know, they're supposed to be soulmates or whatnot, but, so yeah, like, you spend the first episode, they kind of get shown around, and then eventually it's just them, and then she explains to him, like, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm a bad person, or like, that, she doesn't say that necessarily, but she's like, the person he's describing, this, like, humanitarian, like, she went around and, like, helped a bunch of people and stuff, that's not me, you know? Like, I died at a grocery store when I, like, ran into a truck from carts, like, almost coming into me or whatever. And you get this, like, reveal later that there's, like, this real Eleanor Shellstrap or whatever, that, like, the real one, even though it's so ironic that at the end of them, they're calling her the fake Eleanor, and then there's the real Eleanor, when the real Eleanor is actually just fucking Vicky, who's also a demon, and is just torturing her also. But her character is like this super humanitarian kind of person, meant to show that Eleanor didn't really live up to that, and she feels guilty that everyone assumes that that's her, or supposed to make her feel guilty about that. Um, but Chidi has this idea. First, he's freaking out because he's this guy. He freaks out. He doesn't. He just can't make decisions at first. Like he'll have two decisions and it takes him forever just to choose between things and whatnot. But he's like an ethics, professor, so he wants to help because it's his obligation or his duty as a good person to help. He thinks he got into the good place, on principle. We also find out later that that's not true because of his chronic indecision, which not you wouldn't necessarily think is something that could ruin a life, but like he was to an extreme. Like he could never make any decisions and it drove everyone around him crazy. And yeah, so it kind of ruined his entire life basically. um but at first you kind of get the idea that like it's kind of posed as if him and Tahani, which is another character, also one of the main four, who was like this super influential, like she knew all these celebrities and this kind of stuff. Um, like Eleanor calls her conceited early on because that's kind of like one of her flaws, is that she's so obsessed with like saying, well, I know this person and this thing and we did this thing this one time, like all of that. She's always trying to one up people because that's how her parents set her up to be. She always was trying to impress her parents because her sister was always getting all of the praise, but she was never going to be good enough for her parents. And that's the thing she had to learn, is to just stop caring what people think of her, and just be her best self, kind of thing. Um, Stop caring what her sister thinks of her too, because that's a really big sticking point with her. Is like her sister is always one-upping her. Everyone cares about her sister more than her, but she kind of realizes in the end it's not about that. It's about, was I being a good person? And she did all these humanitarian things too, like giving all this money to charity and people and stuff. But she did it without the intention of just doing good for the sake of doing good. She was doing it with underlying intentions of, I'm doing this good thing so that I can one up my sister or impress my parents, or there was always an underlying thing. And that's actually a big theme of the show later, is the complicatedness of being good, because in our world today it's really hard to be good, because they have like an example later where you buy a tomato. Well, that tomato was like farmed from slaves, and like $1 billion industry man like is the one running those slaves, and like it's like a whole thing. Like you buy a shirt, and it was made in China or something, work camps, all this stuff, like shit like that. And every decision you have by buying that would negatively affect your score, and that's why the system was broken to begin with, because everything is so complicated. Um, so, okay, so, right, so Tahani, she kind of has a lot of that going on underneath the surface. She's doing all these good things, but she was not necessarily doing it for the right reason. All of these characters have kind of a theme of the show in there, because that actually comes up later a lot, because as soon as you kind of know about the good place and the afterlife, your intentions to do good at that point and get more points to go to a good place kind of become moot, because your intention at that point is to do good, not for good's sake, but because it'll be good for you to do. You're expecting a reward. That's actually I only had the experience of being a Catholic, growing up Catholic, or whatever. That's actually a thing that they talk about in that religion is, you're not supposed to do things so that you can get into heaven. You're supposed to do things because they're the right things to do. Um, not to try to impress God or something. You're supposed to do them because they're good things to do. You do good things for people, good or bad. You do good things for people, just people, or not people, animals. I don't know. You do all sorts of good things, um, and you do them not for the sake of being, the best, like, not for the sake of reward. You do them for the sake of being good. You know what I mean? And that's reflected through Tahani and her life a lot, because she did do a lot of good things, but she did them in the wrong intentions. So that's kind of nice that was set up in earlier on. Anyway, so Eleanor, she screws up a bunch of stuff. Um, just she'll say all these things like she overtook a lot of shrimp or whatever, and then all these things start happening, like storms and stuff. Be like giant shrimp flying through the air and stuff. This is all stuff Michael did just to torture her, because of the things she had done the previous day or whatever. It was all based on stuff that she was talking about, or her actions, or things that she did, or this and that. So, um, and Chidi sees this too, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And um, she causes like a trash storm because for some reason I don't remember. But anyway, um, but you see her start to get better. That in the second episode there with the trash storm stuff, she wants to go flying, but Chidi's like, "No, you need to help clean up the trash because that was your thing. You caused this. You're supposed to help clean it up." So she does it first, then she goes flying, but then more trash comes down because she chose that action. Um, but then you see her at night, when everyone else is sleeping, she goes and cleans up all the trash. Um, and at this point, are her actions like just because the whole point is she's trying to do good so that she can actually maybe stay in the good place once they see how good she's been or how much she's improved. Once they were to figure out like, hey, she doesn't belong here. Maybe if she's good, she'll be allowed to stay. But it gets really complicated. Like I said, are you doing good for good's sake, or are you doing good for yourself? And in that case, it's kind of doing good for herself, which becomes like I said, the whole flaw in the system there. So anyway, very similar situations throughout the show, and they keep setting up little things and little details and stuff, and that's really nice. There's lots of in jokes and stuff too, so, but yeah, he keeps teaching her philosophy and stuff, and it's really interesting where the show goes, because it's like first season is basically the first run of this neighborhood that Michael's designed, but then there's hundreds of other runs later in the second season, and and that kind of stuff. So, but we get one good run. I think that was a good idea to start with one. We see what one run would go the first one, because then it gives us context for just seeing bits and pieces of other runs, how that would go and stuff. And so that's good. I like that. Anyway, so by the end of the first season, there's also this guy named Jason, who was supposed to be this monk called Janyu, who took an oath of silence or whatever, but he's Tahani's soulmate as well. But he's actually this guy from Florida, and he's just this super party DJ kind of guy, the total opposite of Jianyu the monk, silence and all of this stuff. So, Oh wow, is this Life is Strange? I mean, I guess that is pretty appropriate. Sure, let's go with it. Why not? So yeah, so like it's all designed to be torturing each of these people. They were meant to torture each other. That's kind of the idea here. That's how Michael designed the neighborhood. They're supposed to think that they're in the good place, but they're being tortured by each other. Chidi is being tortured by the fact that Eleanor isn't supposed to be there, and that's going to send him in all sorts of moral conundrums and tantrums about how, like, oh my god, like, what about this and that? But, um, and Tahani, who, like, loves to talk, is with this, like, silent monk sort of person. And then later on she figures out Jason is, like, not that, but, like, even then he's like this, I don't want to call him stupid, because that's not really, like, a nice thing to say, but, like, he's very less, like, smart, intelligence level than the rest of them. But like in a intellectual, like, sort of book reading way, he's more street smart. You know what I mean? He has all of this good advice. He knows a lot of what people need to hear, and that's what's great about Jason. He's kind of a wild card, in terms of he'll always tell these weird stories about, like, his dance troupe or something, or like all of his crazy criminal activities he went and pulled off or whatever. But it always is kind of actually very relevant to the situation, which is super funny. So he's kind of a relatable character for the audience in that way. And the show actually does a lot of good to be very relatable to just a general audience, and I think that's really cool. Um, it's very accessible. It gives you a lot of good philosophy, like basic philosophy stuff and moral stuff, like just in super easy to understand package. Like it doesn't like overblow it. It does get a little bit complicated a lot of times, but like it's always pretty understandable. But it does get you there. It gets you to think about stuff, about, is this right? Is this wrong? How do we improve people? How do we, what philosophy do we want to take? What works about some philosophies? What doesn't work about some philosophies? It really explores a lot of these things throughout the show. Anyway, um, so that's the main four people. You got Eleanor, Chidi, Tahani, and Jason, And they're all supposed to be kind of torturing each other. But what ends up happening, Jason actually tells Eleanor in like the 5th episode or something like that. And he comes to start doing the philosophy lessons too. And so yeah, like you keep they keep growing and becoming better people, which is the exact opposite of what Michael had intended, which is really cool because so that at the end of the season they figure out it's the bad place or whatever, and Michael, because here's what happens. So, I know I'm all over the place because I'm trying to get through it. We're already like a half hour into this thing, and I'm trying to get. We're only in season 1, right? I think it'll go faster from here. So, like, they figure out about all of this. I think they go to the medium place before all of this to, like, go see Mindy or whatever. There's a medium place, too, which, like, only one person ever got to go there because, she died as a pretty shitty person, but she had this, like, idea that she was about to execute that would have really put her up there at the points or whatever, and then somebody else executed the idea for her, I believe, and so should she get all of these points in the afterlife even though she's not there, but her life and her direct actions, and especially at the end of her life there, we're about to get her a whole bunch of points. So the idea is they don't really know, is she supposed to be in the good place, supposed to be in the bad place. So she gets her own medium place where things are just kind of like, there's a lot of good things and a lot of bad things about it. But it ends up just kind of being a mediocre place, I thought it was really cool in the ending. First of all, I thought it was really cool how every character that we've run into so far kind of gets a little moment to shine. But I thought it was cool how we didn't forget about Mindy, especially because the season 3 neighborhood, or season 4 neighborhood? Season 4 neighborhood, was built in the medium place. So it's kind of like we did go and see Mindy a lot. Like, to not have her character wrapped up, that would have been kind of a shitty thing. So, they end up developing this better system where you get to basically test yourself. You don't test yourself. They build a test for you based on things that were hard in your life for you to, do, or for me, like earlier in my life, let's say, it would have been like my social anxiety or something. So they would have put me in a situation where I had to, I don't know, live my truth or something, something to that effect or something. I don't know what it would be now. I'd have to really think about that. Anyway, point being, they design a test that's like really hard for you to do, but you still have to do your best or do the best moral things you have to do in the test. Here's kind of a deep cut, I know, but it's kind of like a Dragon Warrior 3. You ever played Dragon Warrior 3 at the beginning of the game? At least on the Game Boy Color version. I don't know if they do this on the NES game. If they do this on the NES game, that's actually pretty cool. I never really thought about that. Anyway, they do a thing. There's a bunch of little tests beforehand, and based on, I don't know, I think it's just random or something, they'll give you a personality type based on how you do in the test. But each of these tests are kind of like sometimes they're like a moral thing. Like there's one about, you have to help this guy move this boulder or something, and like, depending on how far you go with him, like, you get a better, like, personality thing or whatever. Point being, it's kind of like that, where they'll set up a personalized test for you, and if you do well at it, you move on, you go to the good place. If you don't do well at it, well, you get to retry a bunch of times, and that's fine. Because originally life was the test, but it's not really fair that life was the test. Life, as they figure out, should be the studying for the test. And then what you learned in your life would become the information you need to take the test. And if you don't do well, you get a bunch of other tries, I don't really understand how the system works, because how do people get into the bad place? Do they just... Like, they keep saying you get, like, infinite tries, so how would you... You show no growth or improvement every time or something to that effect? I don't know. But maybe there isn't really a bad place anymore. That might be it. I mean, I guess that might be how it is, because you never really see... Yeah, I think they just kind of do away with the bad place. You get as many tries as you need to... Well, no, because they say something about philosophers not passing the test or whatever. Weird. I don't know. I guess there must be a bad place still. I don't know where the determination lies, like, how long do they give you before you, like, stop being able to take the test or whatever? I don't know. Anyway, the idea is the system is set up to, like, help you to pass the test. But then, as I said earlier, the good place, at the end of the show, they realize, well, the good place is actually, like, really boring. So, they need to design a system to where you can move on. The show can, not the show. I mean, the show, yes, but the people can have an ending, because without the ending, the fun and doing everything in the universe doesn't really matter as much, because there's no finality to it. You just know. You do all that stuff, and then you have the knowledge of knowing that you're gonna be around forever, not being able to do anything fun or meaningful again because you've done everything meaningful and fun. That's what's great about life, is people only have this one to live. I mean, if you want to believe in like reincarnation and stuff, that's fine, but then you have another different life to live, right? So there's an ending to it. As fucked up as it is, as forked up as it is, yeah. In The Good Place, they say like all of these like curse words. It's always like, if you want to say fuck, you say fork. You know, like, it's a censor. Like, you can't actually say the curse words. I guess that was meant to torture them, especially Eleanor, because she wants to say the word. But yeah, so what was I saying? So it's as fucked up as it is, and maybe this is comforting to some people. I don't know really how I feel about it, but death is a finality, you know? And for most people that's scary. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid our whole lives. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, that's a good thing. You don't want to live forever. There's a lot of movies and stuff where people do live forever and they're not happy living forever because it just gets old after a while. You know, if there is no ending, what's the point, you know? So yeah. So they actually, it's interesting. I'll just talk about the end here for a second, because that's what I watched most recently. So Michael just like gets put in charge of the Good Place. They say that the Good Place people say that they want to make him an architect of the Good Place, but they also just kind of run off and leave him responsible for it, which is a pretty big dick move, and I think that actually makes them kind of bad people. But anyway, they're not people. They're like angels or demons or whatever. But you know what I mean. So they make him the Good Place architect, or the head of the Good Place, and then he comes to them, the main four there, and it's like, hey, we gotta like fix this stuff. It's not gonna be easy because they tried for, you know, bazillions of years to fix this stuff, and it doesn't work. Like, there's no way to do it. And then somebody says that quote that Eleanor said about life ending, and that's why it like has meaning. And then she figures out we need to make a like a door or like a gate you just kind of walk through, and then you just kind of stop existing, I guess. Like, we don't really know what happens, but it's an end to your journey in the universe. And actually, we do kind of see what happens at the very end of the show. Is you turn into little sparkle dust, and that sparkle dust like goes onto Earth and like helps people be good people, I guess. Like, this guy brings Michael as mail. I mean, this is just so we can see Michael one more time. He becomes human at the end, by the way, because he tries to go through the door because he's done. He doesn't want to do it either, but he can't because he's not human. He's a demon. He's like a giant fire squid or whatever, like in a human suit. Like, so yeah. So he you know, since he saved everyone, since he saved the whole system, the whole universe, basically, along with the other four and five. And I know this is kind of like counterintuitive to talk about this like now, because like the whole middle part of the story is just like, we're forked. We can't get into the Good Place. We're never gonna get there. Sean has our asses. Sean is like this head demon guy, basically. I don't want to call him Satan, but he's basically kind of like that. So yeah, so like he's constantly trying to track them down and stuff because they actually belong in the bad place, and he knows that. Obviously, he helped start the experiment with the new kind of neighborhood or whatever. That was Michael's idea, by the way. But once that's over, and once they like kind of escape there, he wants them in the bad place because that's where they belong, you know. Um, but as we end up finding out later, the system is so fucked up that nobody has been getting into the good place for like for forever, like for at least 520 something years. Nobody has gotten into the good place because of that complication to your actions, like I was talking about earlier. So that's why they needed to design this new system, and that's kind of what season 3 is more about. Is them, I think it's at the end of season 2 actually, them trying to design a new system, and they don't exactly get there, but then it's about them going back to their lives. So they get another second chance at their lives, and there's a lot of interference with Michael and Janet. Janet's this other character. She's like kind of a helper robot. She's not a robot, but she's like, that's, she always says stuff like that. Not a robot, not a girl, you know. She takes on the shape, like a feminine shape, but she's always like, not a girl. You know, so that's like her thing she says. Anyway, so she has like the knowledge of the universe, basically. Jason and her end up falling in love. That's a whole other thing. I don't have time to talk about like everything. I mean, I can, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get there in a bit. We definitely have to talk about Chidi and Elidor here in a minute. That's an important part of the show. But anyway, so Janet like gets wait, what was it about Janet? I don't fucking remember. Anyway, point being, they get back to go back to their life on Earth. Basically, they get a second shot at it after learning all of this stuff, and the second season is like I was saying, like about like kind of these million reboots where Michael's still trying to figure out a way to torture them, and at the end of all of this, Michael's just kind of like, I can't do this anymore. It's like, you know, I'm done. Sean's gonna figure out that like this isn't working, and we're screwed, you know, basically. And in his desperation, he goes to them and he's like, help me figure this out. Like, help me figure out a way to not get in trouble for this, and then also I will stop torturing you guys, and you guys can just kind of live your lives and do this philosophy thing. And I think they're trying to figure out a way to make the system better at that point. I don't remember. Like, so they just kind of get to live their lives, basically. And they all try to learn ethics still at that point. And Michael starts to even learn ethics and stuff. And it's rocky. It's a rocky kind of thing. But eventually he gets there. And he's always loved humans, or pretended he loved humans. And then he did really love humans later on. And by doing these lessons, he actually becomes more human. And he kind of goes through a lot of the things of he's like a demon, like I said earlier, just in a human suit. So he's never actually been a human or had that finality. But there's a thing like called retirement, where he basically gets like disintegrated, and then like all of his atoms are split up on suns or something like that. Which is basically his version of death. You know, he doesn't necessarily die, but that's kind of the equivalent to that. And so he kind of can understand that finality, the human struggle of you only get so long to live and then you're done, kind of thing. And through that helps him kind of understand like where the humans are coming from and all their emotions and stuff. He definitely gets there by the end. But anyway, point being, they go to this judge, and she, they're trying to get into the good place, because they have determined that they have all grown, and they want to show her that they've gotten better, and this and that, and that the system made a mistake. It's a flaw, you know, that they shouldn't be in the good place. and they're not, I don't think at this point they're really trying to design the system or like fight against the system. They just want what's best for themselves. But then it becomes like they take their own tests, they all fail except for, I think Eleanor passes or something. Right. So like, yeah, like she passes and then all the rest of them fail. I think Eleanor and Chidi pass and then like the other two fail. Um, and so they're able to move on to the good place if they want, but they like also, or no, Chidi doesn't pass because he has like, he just has to choose between hats and then he like can't choose. It takes him like 40 something minutes to choose or whatever. So Eleanor's the only one who actually passes, I think. Um, so yeah, but the rest of them don't pass. But so she doesn't want to move on without her friends. Anyway, point being, they devise this thing where they have to go back to their lives on Earth. So they go back to their lives on Earth, and this is actually one of the best parts of the show. I mean, the whole show is amazing, but one of the best parts of the show is there's a set of like, I don't know, like 5-6 episodes in season 3, I believe, where they go back and fix all of their family problems. Like, so for Eleanor, her mom and her dad were like terrible parents. She basically raised herself. She was a dirtbag to like this environmental guy like at the grocery store. It's actually like the last thing she did before she died was like, you know, tell him to fuck off basically. So she goes back, she fixes that. She had like a shitty job where she lied to old people, like selling them medicine that didn't do anything, that kind of thing. She goes back, she apologizes to the guy, you know, she joins that group to try and help the environment and all of that. She gets a better job, she does all of this stuff. Well, okay, sorry. That is actually earlier because they're like later on they actually get to go and then do the whole things with their parents and all that. So yeah, at first she just like starts doing all this stuff and then she realizes like, fuck this, like why am I doing this? Like there's no point to this. And you see like the other characters kind of get into similar situations too, is like they're trying and then like they just kind of give up. But they all eventually form this soul squad, I think it's called, right? And they meet this other lady, this brain neuroscientist like lady who actually ends up being one of the members in this experiment later in the good place, or the bad place. It's in the bad place. Okay, sorry. It's actually in the medium place, like I was talking about earlier. They designed this thing. There's like 4 other people. This is like early season 4. There's the neuroscientist lady who just thinks she's like in a coma right as she died or whatever. There's this guy Brett who's like an asshole, like in every regard. He's like this misogynistic, like toxic masculinity bullshit kind of, you know, like, oh, they're doing the PC stuff and whatever. Like, oh, I don't really jive with that. So like, there's him. There's this old lady who ended up being like a demon. So they just make it Chidi as the 4th member. They have to like erase his memory to make it fair or whatever. That's a whole nother thing I want to talk about here in a second. The memory erasing stuff, because that's like insane. And then there's this like gossip columnist guy who like knew Tahani in real life. So they're all actually meant to kind of torture the main 4 characters again, or be like the exact opposite of the kind of people that they would want to rehabilitate, because they set up this plan to show that, hey, we got better, so if we can set up a system to where people get better in the good place, without the stresses of life and whatever, because that's what always was so complicated and like did all this stuff, was you would buy a tomato, like I said, and it would just have this ripple effect of consequences. But in the good place, there's none of that. So you just have a totally free environment of all of that. Will people become better or won't they? So that was the next experiment. But it's funny because they all kind of end up figuring it out in their own way, that it's not for reals. Like the gossip columnist guy like learns that because they put Tahani and Jason there again. He like takes on the role of his monk again, and actually he tells Chidi just like Eleanor did in the original neighborhood, like about how he's not supposed to be there, and that's how they think that like Chidi will start helping the other people and stuff, and blah blah blah. But also the gossip columnist guy figures it out, and then he like also has to keep that. So in a way they're all torturing themselves, and they all have a little piece of the puzzle. Brett gets to like learn that like he's in the good place, but there's like a better place, like the best place that he could get into, because otherwise he's not motivated to grow as a person. And he's just like this terrible person the whole time, and he never wants to really improve himself. Everyone else kind of improves a little bit. Like Tahani like improves. John, that was his name. John, the gossip columnist guy. A little bit, like, kind of gets him to realize, like, hey, you're kind of doing a bad thing there on Earth. And then, like, everyone else tries to help Brett too, but he's kind of just an asshole. They set up a scenario where Chidi, like, falls into a sinkhole, but, like, he tries to, like, or no, wait, he falls into the sinkhole, and then Chidi tries to save him. The other two members just, like, run off. They just don't care. But Chidi tries to save him, and he ends up in the sinkhole too. And it's like a whole thing. They actually kind of replayed the ending of the first neighborhood, like the very first one, where like they figure out it's the bad place or whatever, and then Eleanor is there with Michael, just like, haha, you figured it out. You know, like they're being like evil or whatever. But they think that's gonna work because in the original timeline, that is how they all kind of came together. Like, they had this, like, strong resolve, like, hey, you know, or whatever. So, but it's nice because we actually see this good moment for Brent. Like, he finally, at the end, it's just him and Chidi, and they're, like, sitting there. Chidi's kind of angry because he's like, you know, we're actually gonna go to the bad place now. We're done, you know, whatever. But Brent's like ready to apologize. He like gets to, I'm sorry, and then it like pauses because there's like a time limit on the neighborhood or whatever. It's like a year, and it gets cut off right there. But then when you see the results of it, he's like a -1 in points, which is like really not that bad. He could be like negative like billions of points, but you see like his thing like spiked up like right at the end, like it's all like, and then it was like, you know, right at the end because he was ready to apologize and probably take the blame and say, hey, you know, make a selfless act of like, I'm gonna go to the bad place or whatever, and you guys don't have to, etc., etc. But he changed, you know, and you do get to see a little snippet of him in the last episode, like still being an asshole, but it just shows that that was the basis, because then that's why you need to give people as much time as it takes, because some people are like that, and they just are so self-absorbed, and they're so into themselves. But can they change? You know, if you give them enough tries, can they change? That is the question. And that's kind of where they leave that. You know, the test is meant to help you pass, you know, if you can, kind of thing. Anyway, so that was a whole big thing there. But like I said, there's also the episodes where they like get to go back and resolve their problems. Like with Eleanor, it's her mom, like, who didn't raise her. She's got like this whole new family or whatever, and Eleanor goes and confronts her and figures out that she's happy now and she actually is living a better life, and Eleanor ends up being okay with that at the end. Tahani goes and like confronts her sister or whatever, which was like the biggest source of trouble in her life, essentially. You know, and she ends up making amends with her, and they hug it out, and she's like, they kind of mutually bond over how terrible their parents were and how they would always pit them against each other, kind of thing. Um, which is great. Jason goes and helps his dad and his friend become better people. Actually, his dad gets arrested, but that's what it is. So that was him, and then what does Chidi do? Does Chidi get a chance to do that? I don't remember. Anyway, there's a lot going on in this show, so yeah. So that's like basically a lot of what happens in the show. Um, I really love a lot of aspects of it, the characters, the philosophy stuff, all of the moral standings, all of the arguments they make for like, should we do this or should we do that? How do they design a better afterlife system? It's all kind of related to us right now, like how the earth is, how people exist, or how we can help people in our lives, that kind of thing. So yeah, and I mean, at the heart of that is our main characters. And I think that's what's really the core of the show, is these characters and how they grow. And even over multiple reiterations of, like, them losing their memories and stuff, which at first was kind of an annoying concept. I always hate it when they do that, like, the memories get erased. But they end up kind of doing it in a nice way. You kind of see them get to the same place again and again and again. So it's nice, and they do all end up getting their memories back in the end anyway, so that's nice. It's kind of an annoying concept the first time around, but it actually works out pretty well in hindsight, so it was kind of a sticking point for me the first time around, but yeah, no. I mean, I liked it. I thought it went a lot better, knowing where it was going to go. So... Sorry, excuse me. I guess we just talk about it. God, I think, because I feel like I'm gonna walk through the door. Like I'm thinking about it. That was great at the end there. All the characters, when they decide I'm gonna go through the door, and they throw little parties for all of them, and they all kind of have their own place. The only one who stays behind is Tahani, which is interesting, and she becomes like an architect. She really is just like, I want to do like everything, like, and she does. And then she realizes, hey, I can be a good place architect for the tests or whatever. And so she goes and does that, and designing the neighborhoods and whatnot. So, yeah, so that's great. Anyway, so, and everyone else kind of decides at their own moment, but the integral one, because like the not that the other characters aren't important, they obviously are very important, but like kind of our main two characters are Eleanor and Chidi and their relationship. They have kind of a lot of times where they fall in love throughout all of these 802 timelines or whatever, and the first one especially, they end up figuring it out by the end that they love each other, kind of thing. But there was a timeline, and Chidi, like, him being really indecisive or whatever, comes into play. But they go back to Mindy St. Clair's house, like, a bunch of times, in the medium place there. Like, every time, like, not every time they get rebooted, but a lot of the times. And she's like, oh, I've heard this a million times before, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then it's like, she shows her this tape about how one time Chidi actually, like, she says, I love you, and then, she's like, you don't have to say it back, I know how indecisive you are, and then he just stops her, and he's like, no, it's fine, I love you too. And so, like, for him, that's big, because usually he would, like, go into a pretzel about this thing. Like, there was actually, at the end of the first season, he had a choice between, three different people confessed to him, Vicky, who's the fake Eleanor, the real Eleanor, who's actually fake Eleanor, ends up confessing to him. Real Eleanor, who's our Eleanor, ends up confessing to him, and then also Tahani ends up confessing to him her feelings. And then at the end of the episode, they all three just say like, "Oh, I was wrong. I actually this is what I, blah blah blah." So, but he has like this moral conundrum about it. So for him to say that, that's such a big deal. And Mindy St. Clair apparently taped this. So she has like this tape of him saying that. So she'll always go back to this every now and again. And eventually, she ends up showing this to him. And there's a bunch of like back and forth about whether or not they, get together. Not like a bunch of it. It's a little here and there for like a couple episodes. And then they finally just kind of do it. They just kind of get to that point where they love each other, and that's great. And they figure that out. They do that a bunch of times actually throughout the thing. But at a certain point, we get to see that happen, and it's great because those two are like good. They're great. They're meant for each other, kind of thing. Are they soulmates? I don't know. Michael kind of says something about that, like, we kind of would have to make our own soulmates, and blah blah blah, and so yeah. But it's just nice. It's nice that they finally kind of get there, and they have a lot of great moments together. It's a great ship, It's a great relationship that they have. It's very healthy. They're always trying to make each other better versions of themselves, and especially with Chidi, he was always trying to make Eleanor a better version of herself. But she also helped him grow a lot because she would kind of helped him loosen up and learn to enjoy things more. So I think they are really good for each other. Sometimes you need that other person there to crack you out of your little bubble there, of these are the things I know, and I don't want to stray outside of that, So yeah. Their relationship is great, and finally seeing them get there at the end is just super emotional. And then like especially when like Chidi wants to go through the door and Eleanor is like trying to stop him, and then she realizes, through all the philosophy that he taught her, like, hey, I've got to let him go. It's not morally just to not let him go through that door, and they spend like a nice little emotional moment together, and then he's gone, and he goes through the door, and then that's it. And she kind of ties up things like the Mindy St. Clair thing. She helps Michael become human, and then she gets to go through the door too, and she wants to go through the door at that point, so she goes through the door too, and then that's the end of the show. Is that she turns into the little sparkle dust thing and helps that guy get the letter to Michael, who like always wanted to join a rewards program for no reason. It's a very human thing to do, and that's what the letter is. It's just like one of those stupid spam mail things they send you in the mail to like join a reward thing or whatever. But he's so happy to see this, and then also he gets to say his little line there, "Take it sleazy." He said that's like what he always wanted to say to somebody. So he actually gets to say that. That's the end of the show. So there you go. That's us walking through the door, right? But it's just a really amazing, emotional, bingeable, watchable show that has like super good emotional moments, super good philosophical and ethical sort of things to teach you at a very basic level, but also at a complicated level. It'll make you think, it'll make you cry, it'll make you laugh at like every turn. It's like a super great show. Every aspect of it is just like really good, and it's definitely like a favorite show for me, not only because of when I originally watched it or who introduced me to it, but because it just means a lot to me. It's a great show to go back and watch, and it's a very fulfilling ride. You definitely get a complete journey, and there's so many things going on in the show, but it's like you just want to keep watching, and it's so amazing. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's definitely like a top 5 show for me. Up there with the Owl House and Avatar: The Last Airbender and stuff, and um, so yeah. I guess that's it, right? So I think it's only appropriate. My friend and I, the one who introduced me to the show and that book and everything, um, we were out hanging out yesterday. Like I said, getting my ears pierced. We bought this, I bought this, which is the Starry Night or whatnot. She saw it, and we'd just gone to this Van Gogh thing, like I don't know, like a month ago or so. Um, which this is like my favorite painting. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on here before, but I talk about that in my book and stuff. Anyway, she saw this and she said, you have to get this and then write down any good quotes in it that you find throughout your life, right? And I said, okay. And so I bought it, and she made a good quote right away. So I said, I will buy this, but you first have to write that quote in the book. And I wanted to read that because I thought that would be kind of a good ending point. It's much like the so there's one other thing I want to talk about with Chidi and Eleanor. He at one point he like gets his brain wiped to be part of the experiment, and he writes something on there about, like, he wants to write something. He hands it to Janet and says, "Can you give this back to me when I get all my memories back or whatever?" And she's like, "Sure." So later on, when they're like the judge is like ready to shut down the universe basically, so they're gonna like just reboot humanity or whatever, which ends up not happening. It's just like a whole thing, but they have to design a case to make her stop doing that, basically. Anyway, so Chidi gets all of his memories back, and at the very end of that, Janet hands him back a thing, and it says, there is no answer, but Eleanor is the answer. That's one of those kind of like crying tear moments. I don't know, this is kind of like that. Right before Eleanor gets rebooted in the original timeline too, she writes a thing on a paper that says, what we owe each other, which is also a philosophy book. And they actually talk about it at the very end of the show as well. And I want to read that. I bought a copy and I'm going to read that or whatnot. And maybe I'll talk about it on here. I don't know. Anyway, all of these quote things to say, they do a quote at the end about waves and stuff too. All these quote things to say, I thought it'd be appropriate to end with a quote from my friend, and since it just happened yesterday too, it kind of makes sense, and it's a good ending sort of quote. So here we are, ready to go through the door. We're sitting on the little bench here. I'm going to read the quote, and then, we're going to just end the video. This is a 10 out of 10 show. You should definitely go watch it. You probably have watched it if you've watched this, and watched all of this. I love it. I think it's amazing. It's kind of a really special, once-in-a-lifetime kind of show. Stick around, join the Bad Girl Coven with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Never forget, magic comes from the heart. That's another quote. So here we go. We're going to read this, and then we're going to end this video. So, and thank you for watching, by the way. At no point are we at our final destination. Our final destination will always be death. Our entire life, we are constantly evolving to become our truest selves. And that's it. She wrote that for me, and I like that. I think that's a great quote. So, yeah, just go out there and be the most authentic version of yourself And don't let death stop you. In fact, see it as a good thing that there is an end to life. Otherwise, there would be nothing to live for. So, bye.